Okay, before we get started, we're continuing the series on codependency. And today we're going to concentrate on self-parenting and affirmations. So I kind of picked a reading from the language of letting go, the daily meditation book for codependency. I picked a reading from August the 1st. Gratitude. Say thank you until you mean it. Thank God, life, and the universe for everyone and everything sent your way. Gratitude unlocks the fullness of life, turns what we have into enough and more, turns denial into acceptance, chaos to order, confusion to clarity, can turn a meal into a feast, a house into a home, a stranger into a friend, turns problems into gifts, failures into successes, the unexpected into perfect timing, and mistakes into important events, can turn an existence into a real life, and disconnected situations into important and beneficial lessons. Gratitude makes things right. Gratitude turns negative energy into positive energy. There is no situation or circumstance so small or large that is not susceptible to gratitude's power. So say thank you until you mean it. If you say it long enough, you'll start to believe it. There will shine the transforming light of gratitude on all the circumstances of my life. I wanted to read that because we're going to start today, getting into a concept that I consider which is really important in doing a lot of our work. And that is the concept of being able to experience the whole concept of being able to open up the door to a thing called self-parenting. Now, self-parenting is a key piece of the recovery process. And I'll try to explain it as simply as I can. It's almost like looking at life inside of yourself as you're having two parts. You have a child inside of you, and you have an adult. The adult in you is a logical person. The child inside of you is that beautiful little child that wants to play and have fun. But for many of us in growing up, we have deep down inside a wounded child. Trauma very many times, hurt, pain, negative messages, they all create traumas within our own self. And so it's a job for us as the healthy parent to be able to parent that child and to help that child be able to go through a healing, a learning, and a growing. To do that, we use a technique. It's a technique we've used for years, and it's very basic, it's not fundamental. One of the hardest things for codependents to do is to get into our imagination. You know, it sounds strange, but imagination is a key. See, little children have powerful imaginations. They can make anything into something powerful. They can make a cardboard box into a house. They're very creative. Children in growing up also have their personal little friends, their imaginary friends. We call them imaginary, but the children very many times, they're not imaginary. So we tell adult children in codependence, if you really want to get in touch with that little wounded child inside of you, would have you do something a little bit different, but it does work. We'd have you on paper create something called a fantasy family. Go to the world of make-believe. Make believe you're a little child just getting ready to be born. And you have the power to create a perfect family to be born into. How would you do that? I know it's hard to do because we have a hard time getting away from logic. And people will say, well, my childhood wasn't all that bad. All of us, no matter who we are experiencing things as a child. We've gone through some sort of dysfunctionality. Congratulations. that's why sometimes it's really important to get into your imagination, to be able to create that fantasy family. Now, why am I do that if it's not true? Believe it or not, in writing your fantasy family, you are literally identifying your personal needs. I'll give you a couple examples of this. One is in my own life. When I did this work and my therapist told me to write a fantasy family, I thought my therapist was a little touched in the head. But I figured, oh well, I'll do it. So I tried my best to imagine what it would be like to live in a perfect family. So I created a mother that would always give me space and give me distance, to allow me to be a little boy, to allow me just to be on my own, to trust me. I created a father that did the thing that fathers do with a child: have a catch, go to a ball game, spend time together. I also imagined my perfect little place to live in. I created a beautiful little beach house with no neighbors on either side of me for miles. Now, somebody said to me, what does this have to do with your fantasy family? Well, in growing up, I never really had a childhood. My mother never gave me that space and that distance. So in my adult life, I have the need to be able to have space, to be able to be my own person, be able to stand on my own 2 feet. I need a dad, someone I can relate to, I can share things with, I can go to a ball game with, I can enjoy life with. And as far as a place to live, I was born and raised in Camden, and our house was Grand Central Station. I have no idea who the hell was in my house at any time. Everybody. You know, I asked my father, who are they? He said, that's your gumas, that's your goombas. I must have had 100 gumas and 100 goombas. Nobody had names. Everybody was a guma or goomba. And as a result then, our house was the center of everything. There was never any sense of peacefulness and serenity there. And so one of my needs in my life today is the need for serenity, excuse me, the need for inner peace, the need for tranquility. And I realized in writing my fantasy family, I literally was identifying my personal needs as a person. Now we take this into a lot of other areas too, in doing self-parenting. I'll give another good example of it, how the fantasy concept works. I had a young couple come to see me who were getting ready to get married. They were both members of Narcotics Anonymous. And I was going to perform their wedding. So we had kind of a session to get ready for their wedding. And they said to me, they said, Vince, there's all kinds of battles going on in our family. Her family wants to invite these people. They want to have alcohol. They want to do these things. Her family, the two families were having all kinds of conflicts. So I got a yellow pad and I said, go in the other room. Forget your two families exist. I want you to create on paper your perfect wedding, exactly how you want it to be. Make believe you don't have two families. They said, what do I prove? I said, do it. So about 45 minutes later, they came back, showed me what they had written. And I said to them, congratulations, that's your wedding. They said, really? Excuse me. I got a little frog visiting my throat here. I said, congratulations, that's your wedding. They said, for real? I said, yeah. Stop worrying about what everybody else thinks. This is what you need for your wedding. So we did the ceremony based on the 12 steps, based on the recovery process. And at the reception, they did something totally different. Instead of doing the traditional things they do at a reception, the two of them took the time to share their recovery stories. There was not a dry eye in the whole entire house. All their parents thought it was wonderful and it was great. It was about the recovery. It meant something to them. See, we have to learn something which is really important. So many of us have deep down inside all kinds of needs. And those needs go back to that little child that's inside of us, that wounded child. And that's why it's so important to be able to express these, to be able to get them out, to be able to get them met. And I'll show you another concept where we use the surrogate concept. See, I've learned this in my life about parenting and taking care of my needs. I got a phone call from a lady back in 1989. She was a member of Adult Children of Alcoholics. And she said, "Vince, I want to ask you a big favor." I said, "What?" She said, "Well, I'm getting married. My father, who's an alcoholic, came to my sister's wedding and just about destroyed the wedding. He was drunk. He created all kinds of problems. It was a terrible evening. I made a decision. I'm not inviting him to my wedding. I want a favor if you can do it. I'd like you to be my surrogate father at the wedding." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah." So I thought about it, and you know what? Why not? And believe it or not, I probably never get that opportunity being a stepfather. So I actually got the opportunity to get dressed up, to walk her down the aisle, to sit with her mom, and then to dance with her to Daddy's little girl. It was a powerful experience for her as it was for me. See, we're learning how to take care of ourselves. And the fantasy concept is a great way of doing it. But we're learning something which is really important. Every one of us has needs. And we have to learn how to take the time to be the adult parent in the room, to be able to identify our needs. Later on, we do family of origin work. We'll use this concept to help us to go through a healing process. Because I've learned that so many of us have a hard time going within, identifying our hurt, our struggle, the things that are going on inside of us. And that's why it's important to be able to open up these doors to move into a new direction. One of the things I love, there actually is a book called The 12 Steps to Self-Parenting. And they actually put together using the 12 steps as parenting tools. If you're interested, you want a copy of those 12 steps or how to get the book on Amazon, you can go to our website, go to Vince's Corner, scroll down to additional resources, and you will see there the 12 steps of self-parenting, which will help you to understand this a lot better. See, I've learned something. For every negative we have in life, there's a positive. So things that we experienced on the negative plane, we have to be able to identify them, process them, learn from them, and be able to heal. You know, I look at this in my own life. My little boy had a lot of hurt and a lot of pain, a lot of things he went through. And that needed to be healed. So in doing self-parenting work, once I began to identify the needs of my inner child, I began to work on ways in which I could help, guide them, and protect them in the adult life of today. And that powerful process works because I really believe we have the responsibility to take care of ourselves, to be able to nurture, to be able to heal, to be able to look at things that happen in the course of our journey and not sit around expecting things to happen that are never going to happen. I mean, I did it. We all did it. I spent a lot of time blaming my family, blaming the church, blaming all kinds of people for my unhappiness. What I have found out later on was my unhappiness didn't come from any of them. It was my journey, my life, my hurt, my pain. I had to be able to go through the process of being able to face stuff and heal it. And even to this day, I still use this concept. You know, many times I try to tell people, give yourself permission every so often just to be a little child and love that little child. That's why I tell you, when you're doing self-parenting work, get a copy, a photograph of yourself as a little girl, a little boy, and put it in a little frame so you can spend time with it and talk to that child. Because that little child's been waiting for you for a long time. You got to be able to get in touch with that child. One of the things I believe very deeply that goes along with this, we have to learn a process called affirmations. Now, what's that all about? In order for me to do self-parenting work, I have to approach my history and my family with a positive attitude. See, the purpose of this recovery process is not to find out what's wrong with you. It's to be able to identify the hurt, identify the pain, and go through the healing process of learning from it, growing from it, so I can learn positive lessons from every negative I've experienced. It's amazing how this works. But again, you have to be able to allow yourself to feel, to be in touch with the feelings, to be able to open up the door, to go through the healing process. It's never easy, believe me. Because that little wounded boy inside of me, I'm going to work on healing his wounds. Hopefully until about 10 years after I'm dead. I probably have some things to work on. See, it's all about growing, about learning, about experiencing, and using techniques to do that. And so what we do is we use the concept of being able to heal and make peace with the stuff we did with the fantasy family. You know, we learn to take care of ourselves. I'll give you an example. I remember when I was doing this work, I wanted my dad to take me to a ball game. My dad died when I was pretty young. I was 26 years old. My dad wasn't into sports. I never really had anybody that would do this with me. So what I did, I asked a therapist friend of mine, Michael, if he would go with me and we could spend 3 days together. I wanted him to be my surrogate dad. We went to the Hall of Fame. We were able to spend 3 days there. We stayed together in the evenings. And the bottom line was, he was able to have that catch with me on Doubleday Field at the Hall of Fame. I was able to get my needs met and find them through somebody else to help me out with it. See, I could walk around and feel sorry for myself. Woe is me, my dad never did this. But I can take the responsibility through parenting, through affirmations, to be able to ask someone to help me through this process, to be like a surrogate person with me. You know, I begin to realize this too, because one of the things, we all realize it, growing up as children, many of us were programmed negatively. some worse than others. I grew up in the 40s, and as you know, I mentioned it before, I went to the Italian Catholic grammar school back in the 40s, and I was taught fear, guilt, shame, and trepidation. They were my normals as a child. I was never taught the concept of love. Everything was something's going to happen to you. You're going to end up in hell. I wanted to tell sister I'm already here, but she wouldn't have went for that. I probably would have got belted a few times. But the bottom line is, I'm learning that that hurt and that pain is there. That struggle is there. And today, I don't want to feel that guilt and feel all that stuff. I want to be able to nurture who I am, take care of who I am, and build on who I am. And that's important. We forget that sometimes. It's the same thing when it comes to different areas of our life that we have to heal and deal with. You know, I had to work through a lot of stuff to be able to make the decisions I had to make in my life. But I had to be able to give that child a sense of peace. So like I mentioned, I spent a lot of time being angry at my mom. I finally was able to work through that, through using these principles. But I want you to try something. You'd be surprised in doing affirmations where this stuff actually comes from. Ask two people that you really feel close to and you feel comfortable with to write you a letter telling you everything they like about you. Tell them nothing negative is allowed to be in the letter. So try to find two people that you basically feel comfortable with, and those two people, ask them to tell you all the wonderful things about yourself as a person. Tell them, though, nothing negative is allowed in the letter. Then when you're done, write yourself a love letter. Tell yourself everything you like and love about you as a person. And I find this really interesting because when I gave the assignment out, I learned that writing a love letter to myself is very uncomfortable. I'm not used to that. And yet there's a lot of beauty inside of me. So it's almost like the first time you write it, it's about that big. About a month later, you write it, it's about that big. 3 months later, it's about that big. It keeps growing and growing and growing. And it's the old philosophy. If I can just take my time, work through the things I have to work through, so I can learn and grow as a person. That's the important part of that. And the most beautiful thing is, try to remember that affirmations are things that we can learn about ourselves in our life. You know, I almost like we have to be reprogrammed. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories. I remember a good friend of mine, and he's a psychologist named Dan Gottlieb. And I love Dan. He used to have a radio show, had a lot of good stuff. But every year when I was a priest, he would run a day of recollection for paraplegics. And he would ask me to come and actually do the day of recollection with them. I always admired whatever I did that week. I always admired one of the gentlemen on that retreat. It was really interesting. Now here's a gentleman who basically was a paraplegic, was in a specialized chair. You know, his body was twisted. And I saw him sitting in front of a mirror looking at himself. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, every day I stand in front of this mirror and I tell myself how special, how beautiful, how powerful I am." He just did something which is hard for us to do, and that is to affirm, to look at things in positive ways, to be able to open up these doors. And one of the hardest things about doing that is we don't realize how much hurt and pain many of us have deep down inside. So self-parenting, affirmations, years ago they used to do something back in the 50s. When you went to the supermarket back in the 50s, and I remember because I worked as a 17-year-old in 1957, I worked in a place called Food Fair. Now, I'm aging myself now, right, Lanham? Anyway, what they would do it in the supermarket, and I didn't realize it until later on, when you went to the supermarket, they played this beautiful music. It was almost like so relaxing and so beautiful. What they were doing is an old trick. They were actually dubbing in stuff behind it. You couldn't hear it. And they were trying to sell you products. And so as you're shopping, you're hearing a subliminal message say, buy Blopto chewing gum. And when you get to the counter, you notice they have a whole display of Blopto chewing gum. Next thing you know, you're checking out. You just bought five packs of Blopto chewing gum. You don't even chew gum. You go home and you say, what the hell did I buy this for? You were programmed to buy it. It's called indirect brainwashing. And it's amazing because that concept was outlawed, but I'm not too sure they're not still using it. I wouldn't put it past them. But the beautiful thing about it is that many of us got programmed in negative ways. And that's why it's so important for us to begin to realize our value, our strength, begin to realize where things are going in the course of our life. I got my little buddy here who's given to me. And I'm learning more and more to be able to realize the beautiful part about being an inner child, being in touch with that child inside of you. And I kind of put it in a kind of a nice way. And I'll share this with you later when I do the inner child work. One of the things I realize is being able to parent, being able to take care of me. Now, okay, I'm a step parent. I've got to learn to take care of the children that were under me. They're no longer children, of course. But the bottom line is, how do I parent me? How do I take care of me? How do I get my needs met? Where do I get them met? And that's one of the philosophies and the concepts of our 12-step programs. So basically what you're doing is you're helping somebody else to do some growing, but you're growing too. So what do we do as family? We got to take care of us and work on ourselves. We got to get healthy. And so we have to be able to realize the fact that these things pertain to us too. Because what do families do? Things that I did for years. Save everybody, fix everybody, change everybody. And of course, I come from the old school of thought where they decided you're going to get changed and then basically they change you. Now, did it last? Of course not. But, remember I told you about tying people up and taking them to rehabs and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. That's a different generation. And the bottom line is, there's so many different ways this whole disease, everything else that we take care of. The beautiful way is through different types of 12-step programs. And so when we look at this whole concept of self-parenting, this concept of affirmations, take the time to look within your own self, because I really believe growing up, so many of us were indoctrinated with negative behaviors, negative feelings, negative concepts. I often say I was a barrel full of guilt, shame, fear, anxiety, tension, worry, 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 worry. When I got into AA, I got into recovery, I began to realize, no, I'm not all that stuff. I'm something better and something more beautiful. And therefore, I'm going to take the time not only to re-educate myself, but to open the door for all of us to be connected with one another. And that's really important. And so if we truly, truly care about ourselves, then we'll do what we have to do in the concept of it. So I hope this helps you to understand the wounded child and the concept of the inner child a little bit better, to understand the recovery process and how it works. One of the things I'm going to close with, I think it's important. Remember to take the time to look within yourself. Remember the value of each of you as people. Try to the best of your ability to be present to us here today. Let us pray. God, we come before you in prayer. We ask the God of our understanding, our divine presence, to be our guide, to be our strength. Help us to be able to realize that around us are so many people that are hurting. Things in time change. Life changes. And I think we all have to be able to realize the importance of that and to realize the value that we have deep down inside. God, you've given us so many gifts. You've given the gifts of imagination, the gifts of growth. You've given us the strength to be able to activate these gifts and be in touch with them. Please, walk alongside of us as we continue this journey and realize the value we have for one another. We come together, we ask God to bless us and guide us, and we ask this in your name. Amen.